We welcome everyone to our Buffalo Soldiers podcast. We do this on a monthly basis, and we have with us today three special guests who work in education. First of all, we have Mr. Steve Sanders, who is the Chief of Staff at the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, and we appreciate him for joining us today. We have Mr. Leo Holland, who is the principal of East High School here in Bakersfield, and we're happy to have him. And then finally, we have Mr. Marshall Dillard, who is the chairman of the African American Network of Kern County, as well as the principal of William Penn Elementary School here in Bakersfield. And we're happy to have him with us today as well. I'm going to be turning it over to our lead person today, Mr. Gary Johnson, and he works with the African American Network as well, and works in radio, also works in education. So he wears many hats. So Mr. Johnson, we turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you. And again, welcome everybody to the call. I'm going to go with the first question. How has virtual learning been working, and are students keeping pace or falling behind? And the second part of that question is, what has been the biggest challenge, concern, success? Was everyone able to hear that clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So whoever wants to chime in.
Well, I think initially, I think there was a big drop off, a big fall, which was bound to happen just because of the nature of the pandemic here and how we've had to handle it. But I think I think there's been adjustments that we've made educationally as far as our students are concerned, and implementation of providing services to our students. I think there has been a climb, but will it be at the same level of instruction that it has been in the past? That would take some time, just because we're still new to this type of instruction that's taking place.
Okay. Mr. Sanders, would you like to respond?
Sure. I think, yeah, from a countywide perspective, there's pros and cons to everything. And, just think about the pandemic and how it's affected our lives. There's some good things that have come out of it, but then a lot of challenges. I think initially, as Mr. Dillard said, we had to really scramble, and school districts, really went from shutting down school on, I believe it was March 17th, to quickly getting out paper packets to students. Actually, Bakersfield City School District led that effort. They developed take-home packets for kids at all grade levels and shared those with all of the 47 districts throughout Kern County. But immediately districts positioned or pivoted to distance learning. And so one of the benefits that has come out is that I think teachers, parents, students have embraced technology much quicker than they would have otherwise. And so I think that will see some long-term benefits as well.
Okay. Mr. Holland.
My beautiful school behind me in the virtual background, we're the second oldest school in Bakersfield. And the last time we had a global pandemic, our first graduating class was not born yet. So when you take the whole picture in perspective, I think there had to be a lot of buildup to the virtual learning environment, and it required a massive mobilization of effort to move curriculum from an in-person format of delivery to the virtual format. And I think by and large, all districts in our county did a great job with that effort. It's a lot of heavy lifting involved in that. And speaking specifically for the Kern High School District, I can say that for us, it's been a growth mindset for all of us that we've had to embrace with regards to this. I think one of the things we said going into this year is now everybody is a first-year teacher all over again. Our veteran teachers are learning to teach in a new format, and students are learning to learn in a new format. And it goes even beyond that. I have a couple of reference points for you that I can give. With high schools, kids walk home, and on their way home, they spend money. they stop at the neighborhood store and buy a soda or chips or whatever on their way home. So virtual learning has had an impact on not only our students and teachers and administration, but neighborhood businesses. We have a pizza shop up at the corner of in the Albertsons parking lot, the corner of Mount Vernon and Columbus. Queen's Pizza provides a ton of pizza for our club activities, our student store at lunch. It's a huge hit on his business, and he's a very big supporter of the Blade family. And it's a huge hit on his business that we don't have kids coming to school. So even our neighbors have had to adjust to the fact that kids aren't walking back and forth from school. Parents have had to learn how to parent kids who are in distance learning. It's a different mindset for parents, how to reach out to counselors, to teachers when you can't necessarily go to the school and get a hold of people readily like you were able to before. It's all been a huge adjustment. And like I said, I think everyone, with regards to the high school district at least, handled it the best that we could. So, and when you talk about, the initial problem, as it was just pointed out by Mr. Sanders, of just trying to figure out how to go online, just the mobilization of getting Chromebooks out to kids was a huge undertaking initially, because we were not ramped up to do that for every student. So getting there was required a mobilization. And so, from Arvin to Shafter and Kern Valley, all the way out to Frontier, all the high schools, did what they needed to do to get those Chromebooks in the hands of students, and then the Wi-Fi access in the hands of students, which BCSD and the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, we all had to work together to make sure that that was covered. I mean, it required a huge mobilization on all parts, and I think we did it as good as we could. As far as concerns moving forward, we're still trying to make sure, as Mr. Dillard was pointing out, we have to make sure we are continuing to engage students. It's hard on a distance learning environment, and it's an effort that we're still going through to make sure we have all of our students engaged in school.
One of the things I've told my teachers early on is, I said, this is the first in the history of mankind that we have taken instruction in this current virtual learning format. Never has it ever been in the whole history of educating people that we have had such an undertaking such as this. So our teachers had no real training to do this. They just had to learn it on their own, a lot of it on their own. We've been providing some PD, professional development, to the teachers, but for the most part, they just had to switch gears quickly to change to this virtual learning format. So this is a huge undertaking, and I don't think our teachers receive enough accolades for the change that they've made, because they've done a phenomenal job with the way they've instructed from in-person to now virtual.
Yeah, so we know what the challenges and concerns have been. What would you guys say the major successes have been? If you were sitting in front of parents now, how would you motivate them to know that their children are getting the best education that they can under these circumstances?
I mean,
Anyway,
I'll take a stab at that. I think that to some degree, parents have gained a whole new respect for teachers and the teaching profession. We take for granted sometimes what we have. And so you send your kids off to school, they receive their education, they come home. But parents have had to, but not by choice, be much more involved in the day-to-day aspects of what goes on. And what we've heard is from parents and community members is definitely an appreciation for what happens at school and the challenges and the rigor that our school districts try to instill in these kids. It's in a lot of cases, it's a lot different than when parents went to school, in terms of what kids are expected to know by what age and what grade, et cetera. And so that's been a positive, I think, in the sense of we can capitalize on that engagement, because I think there's a better understanding of how important school is and the role of educators in the day-to-day lives of our kids.
Great. Anyone else want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think this successes with regards to the mobilization of getting kids prepared to attend virtual school was a huge success. And I think the ongoing efforts of our teachers to add new strategies to their toolkits
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that they're connecting and providing instructional strategies that allow for student learning to continue and to be enhanced. Huge success. There was a lot of mobilization and professional development in Kern High School District to try to get our teachers as many tools as possible to get kids able to adapt to this new environment. And it, I believe, was a success on the parts of our instruction division and our professional development, our TOSAs, to make sure that we were able to get that information in the hands of our teachers to try to make a successful transition to virtual learning. And then I think also, we are highly concerned with students who are not connected right now, but the amount of kids that we've managed to keep connected and the success stories that we have had, I think, are a success story. And so there has been a lot of success, but we still are learning and want to do better. And I think in education, in the high school district, we want every student to graduate prepared for whatever comes next in life. That's our mission statement. We're striving to get there in this virtual setting. And so while we tend to focus on areas where there have been challenges or areas of concern, I think there are vast areas of success even in this virtual environment.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mr. Sanders, Mr. Holland there. There have been a vast number of successes there. And I think one of the biggest concerns were the students, getting them to just navigate within this virtual world, especially coming in at kindergarten students trying to navigate. And I just look at my kindergarten students now virtually while I'm visiting classrooms, and I am just blown away with how they just navigate through everything. Because one of the biggest concerns was, okay, so if a student needs additional support, which means they're going to have to leave the classroom, which they would normally do, go to a small group setting to receive additional support. So one of the biggest concern was, well, how are we going to get the little kindergarten student to be able to navigate to go to this other small group setting and then have them come find their way back to our virtual classroom? And you will be amazed at how they have just adapted to the whole change. Because those little kindergartners, they just leave the classroom when it's time for them to leave, to go to their small group setting, and they return to their classroom when it's time for them to return to their classroom for their large group instruction with the teacher. Had one of the kindergartners a couple of weeks ago. One of the teachers, she had to, she was providing instruction from home because normally she's on campus. But this particular time she was stuck at home and had to provide instruction from home. So she didn't have all the technology and everything at home that she normally has on campus. And her Wi-Fi kept freezing, would freeze a lot, or she'd get kicked out, and so forth. But this one particular instance, and I'm just happened to be in the classroom at this time, she was about to read a story to the kids. And then all of a sudden her document camera, in which she uses additional camera, she uses to read stories, to show the book, and she'll read the story and the kids will follow along. But the document camera had frozen and wasn't working. And so she was just kind of frazzled by it. And then I just heard one of the kindergartners say, Mrs. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, just hold the book up like this and just do it this way, and we'll follow along like that. And she just said, oh, you're so right. And it was just like this whole thing. But the kids just really adapted to it. And I mean, now they're actually kind of leading the way themselves too.
Would anyone else want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think I've heard a few of those instructional victories, I guess I would term them as, where the students and the teachers, in many situations, and with most of our faculty, speaking at East High at least, understand that we're all in this together. And I think it's kind of the mindset that we've all had to adapt to with regards to the pandemic generally. We're kind of all in this together. And so you get the feedback, just like Mr. Dillard was pointing out, where there are these small victories that happen on a day-to-day basis from one teacher to the next, where the kids and the teachers are in this struggle together. The variable of internet connectivity, which started me off with this particular podcast in a bad spot, just trying to get my Outlook to restart so that I could log in to do this interview. And our teachers are dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. And then in our case, multiply that by 2,400 students who also have these body internet issues. And just those moments are victories too. I think that, along with the pandemic, makes sure that we all understand that, we're all the same. We're all in this together. Everybody is kind of both beholden to the virus and to technology right now. And we're all trying to adjust and adapt together. And so I've heard many stories like that from my teachers so far this year. They're good stories to hear. And some of the courses, like our band program, he sends me some feedback once in a while, is just fantastic about the kids working with her. And when you're used to being together to perform music, and now you're doing it virtually from home, not together, not with everybody else, everything I hear from her is typically a success story. And so many of our other teachers are coming with the same types of stories.
Great. Well, if there are no further comments, I'll move to question number 2. Are there any differences in the implementation of distance learning by school districts across Kern County? Who wants to take that on?
I don't mind starting.
Okay.
Just from a county's perspective, we kind of at the superintendent schools work with all 47 school districts. And so I would say that there's more similarities than there are differences. I mean, the great thing about having local control in local districts is the ability to meet the kids and parents, at wherever they need to be met in the local community. But at the same time, we have probably about almost 70% of the school districts' classrooms are using a platform called Canvas to do their instruction. The other districts are using Google Classroom or something similar. So I would say that whether they're using Canvas or Google, they're able to have their lessons online. They're able to have that video interaction component. And so there's been a lot of commonality and a lot of collaboration with districts using similar platforms, which helps on a professional development level. It helps maybe if you're a parent with kids in multiple districts so that you have your kids using similar platforms. So I'd say there are some differences, but a lot of similarities as well.
Okay.
So across the high school district, we're all, as Mr. Sanders alluded to, we all use the Canvas learning platform. Most of our teachers, I think, across the district use Zoom for their actual virtual meetings with students, their virtual classroom, but the courses are set up in Canvas. Some of our teachers will use other platforms for their virtual meetings. I know there are some teachers in the district who use Google Meet, but the overarching platform is uniform throughout the district, and that's Canvas. I can say, so I have 6 kids, and I varying ages in our household. My wife and I are blessed with 6 amazing kids. We have one who graduated from East, who's back home, came home right at the end of the pandemic. She graduated from Berkeley in May. She's been home to help us out. I'll probably talk about this more a little bit later, but in my house, I have 2 kids who are in the 4th grade, BCSD, 1 kid who's in the 7th grade, BCSD, and then I have 2 high school sons at my school. And their learning environment is pretty much the same. When the little kids and the big kids, the biggest difference is there are more screens off with the older kids, and with the younger kids, the screens are typically on. and the time is different. Our attendance time at East is different than the attendance time of our middle school daughter, which is actually different than the attendance time of our fourth graders. So the biggest difference that I see in my household is actually the hours of school and what they look like. For the younger guys, they don't go quite as long. Our fourth grade twins are done by noon most days. Our seventh grader has a break, and then she gets done a little bit later. And the boys go basically straight through from 8 o'clock to 1. And in my household, that's the biggest difference. As far as what the teachers are doing, my teachers know that their screens are on, or their teaching is on in the principal's household. So they're doing a fantastic job. So they're dialed in, right? And then with my daughter's teachers, I think they're doing a phenomenal job, and the students are engaged in those classes. And then the twins teacher, she has to put up with my twins, first of all, but she is doing a fantastic job. So the similarities are actually pretty consistent. What I see is very similar. The hours seem to be the biggest difference, along with, like I said, the screens. With the little kids, every kid's screen is on, and as the kids age, there are less and less screens on, but the strategies for making sure kids are engaged also evolve as the kids get older. So the teachers in high school, even though the screens are off more frequently, they still figure out how to make sure kids are engaged through the chat box and those sorts of things.
Mr. Dillard.
Well, I mean, I can't add anything different there. You have we deal with, we use Google Classroom. Zoom is our mode of communications as far as virtual learning is concerned. And so Mr. Holland just, he basically told you everything, especially since his children, his younger children go to BCSD schools. So I have nothing new to add to what he said.
Okay, Mr. Sandifer, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, we'll go to question 3, and any of you can respond. Are students being hurt by not having socialization, which comes with in-person classes? And then what are some possible residual effects of this, let's say, if they are at a disadvantage?
Well, I know you try to make it as normal as possible virtually. We have teachers who place students into groups, and so they go into a breakout room to work together, to collaborate together. It's just that they're not in person any longer. They're now collaborating virtually in their own little separate breakout room, and without the teacher just kind of hovering over them or having an actual visual of what the students are doing and can hear what they're saying, because the teacher may be in another group, in another breakout room. So, but we try to keep it as normal as possible as far as that is concerned. Putting students in groups, having students go to their go to their learning teachers or their reading teachers. Now, but one of the biggest effects I see from this lack of socialization is the ability to run around. Because I know at the elementary level, kids, they like to run around. They're out at recess, they're running around. And so I've seen when kids come to pick up their lunches, I've seen weight gain. I've seen some, and so I know that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed as far as, student health is concerned.
I couldn't agree with that more with regards to the younger kids being able to get out. We have to make sure the twins get out and exercise every day. I mean, it's just, that part of things, that kind of playtime is missing with our, I can't speak to every family as well as Mr. Dillard can, but with our kids, it's certainly an issue in my house. I have to make sure they get out and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
They're missing that. And some of it too is kids learn how to, work things out and, create fair play and those sorts of things on the schoolyard when they're young. And so missing some of that is not helpful. And I'm lucky because I have two of them, so they, argue and figure things out together still. But if I were the only kid in a household, fourth grade or so, that might be a little different. With us, it's with high school level kids, high school district. I think Mr. Dillard's spot on. We're trying to create those opportunities for kids to have moments together with their peers through breakout rooms and other after school virtual activities. Even though we don't have athletics practicing or competition, our coaches are still meeting with the kids to talk about their grades and to help coach them up on strategies for the sport that they're going to play and those sorts of things. But it's an opportunity for them to get together. And then even yesterday, we had an after-school rally, a virtual rally, just to try to give kids that level of interaction with one another. And trying to create those opportunities is challenging in a virtual environment, but we're trying and doing the best that we can to do that.
Mm-hmm. And we had happened to have an assembly yesterday at our school site. It was a virtual assembly, and so that was the first time that actually this school year that you got to see all of the faces, predominantly almost all of the faces of your entire student population on your computer at one time during this assembly. And I had one teacher text me saying it was just so nice just to see her students that she had last school year, virtually, because she hadn't seen her past students this school year because she's so busy with her current class. Whereas if you're in person, usually running to the kids outside on the playground as you're walking to your class or going to lunch or whatever the case may be. So this was the first time she had opportunity to see any of her students that she's had in the past.
Excellent point. I think sometimes we forget how invested teachers are in the education of the students they teach. And one of the things, we have a policy it's not I don't even want to call it a policy. We have a history or a legacy at East of teachers standing in the doorway during the passing period. And it does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is it allows for teachers to high five and see and check in with students they've had in the past. And it's good for the students too. I mean, the students know that there's an investment, an ongoing investment in their success. And everybody's missing that right now. It's hard on our teachers. It's hard on me. I have students that I check in with. I go out at lunch and make sure I talk to them once or so a week to make sure they're doing okay. Just kids that I've known over the years that I'm not able to check in with right now. That's hard on all of us right now, and I know it's hard on the students too.
So it's good that you all are doing these things in lieu of not having in-person classes, and because socialization is a big part of the picture. So it's good to hear that you're doing these things to help the students to get through their day. So can I go right to question 4, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, absolutely.
And then what I'd like to do, since question 5 was the lieutenant's question specifically, she can ask question 5. She wrote that in. So, but question 4, what are your concerns of spreading COVID-19 when schools return to in-person learning, such as your teachers, your students, your support staff, include medical staff as well? And then will the distance learning option still be in place for parents who request it once schools go back in person? Any of you can jump in first.
Well, I think it's naturally going to be a concern. I mean, it's just the way it is right now. I mean, it's just a concern for everyone. So there's not going to be any different if and when we return to in-person instruction. Mm-hmm. And it's I don't know. It's really hard to say. I mean, things change. It's been changing. Everything, it changes so rapidly. Your plans change, their expectations change, or what some of the recommendations change, and so you just kind of go with the flow and just, I don't know, just do the best you can. I don't know how to answer that one too much.
We got some help here. So Mr. Sanders and Mr. Holland, jump right in, sir.
We've had experience with, we operate preschools, we operate special education classrooms. So we definitely saw some impacts when you return to in-person instruction. And, a lot of it is, it's not even that it's spread at school. And even the CDC will say that school is one of the safest places in terms of COVID transmission. But, you have adults and kids mixing, you have adults that even if they're not positive, a lot of times have to be quarantined because of possible exposure. So that's impacted in-person instruction. As the vaccine becomes available, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks for educators under the age of 65, that hopefully will help in terms of transmission of COVID. And then I'll just say on the second part of the question, at the superintendent of schools in our talks with our districts, our superintendent, Dr. Barlow, has really encouraged them to look at distance learning as something that wasn't just a stopgap. We've invested so much time and energy into it. How do we make sure that we continue to use that as an option, knowing that in-person instruction is still best for kids? So, there will be distance learning options for parents that don't feel safe sending their kids to school, I believe, at least for the foreseeable future. But also, how do we use this as a time to capitalize on what we've built? And maybe moving forward, there's different, it's more of a hybrid type of education where kids are getting the best of both worlds.
For those, let's say a teacher is overly concerned about the possibility of getting COVID, because it is spread by humans. How do you, as administrators, how do you conference or counsel with that person? If they're overly concerned and they want to continue the distance learning, what would you say to them?
I don't know yet, and I don't think we know yet. I think really Mr. Dillard kind of hit the nail right on the head. This is all evolving so rapidly and changing so rapidly that I think ultimately the best thing that we can do, and I think what our district has tried to do, and I think really all of our local districts are trying their best to do, is kind of follow the science and the law and recommendations of the state and the county with how to reopen and what that looks like. And that information has evolved multiple times. Some people would say change. I don't like saying that it's change, because I think it's an evolution of what we know about the virus and what we know about social practices and those sorts of things. And so as this evolves and continues to evolve and the landscape evolves, we'll continue to evolve our policies and strategies to get reopened as it's applicable and available to us, and we're able to safely. I think Mr. Sanders said something that's very, important too. I mean, right now we're looking at this through a lens where not very many of our faculty and staff members have been able to be vaccinated. Well, that could change very rapidly. I mean, if suddenly we get an influx of vaccinations in the state and teachers are now being vaccinated, they could change, but we just don't know. And so, I for the sake of the three administrators in this particular interview, I will say that it's hard for us to look too far forward right now, because we simply do not know. And right now, as a community, and this Kern County community, the virus is still in control right now. The virus is still in control in Kern County, unfortunately. So as we continue to bring the rates down and we start getting control again of this pandemic in our community, things will evolve again for us. And I think we'll look at what it looks like to reopen and those sorts of things as things continue to evolve. And all of our districts will make the best decisions that we can. The boards of directors and the superintendencies will all try to make good decisions for the teachers and students. And
Okay, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to navigate in uncharted waters. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate your response there.
I wanted to add something. I want to ask a question to the panel. And I don't know if you considered this, but you just said something that was extremely important. There's a lot of resources, financial and otherwise, that have been put into this new platform. Do you see it as a benefit with kids who may be ill or hurt and can't come to school as a way of making sure that they get that instruction personally, in a virtual environment?
So we had already, Kern High School District had already started that Kern Learn program, which had a kind of a blended learning model that we had already rolled out. So I don't know how much evolution will come with regards to distance learning, but you spoke about students who have medical conditions. Yes, I think that's something to wrap our minds around. Also, students who may have anxiety disorders. There are different pockets of students who are actually, thriving now where before they struggled. And so, there's two sides to every coin. There is another side to the distance learning coin. That kind of successes that I talked about earlier, where you see little pockets of, actually a lot of pockets of success, but one of them is some of our students who struggled in person are striving. And it's an interesting question that we'll be attempting to answer throughout the spring, and particularly as hopefully the virus subsides and we're able to start considerations of what returning to school looks like. That is one of the questions that we will have to answer.
It doesn't impact us as much anymore, but think about all the days we used to have fog delays and school stopped. Well, now if you have a fog delay, kids can be on distance learning and it just continues. So
Right.
fortunately, we
That's
don't
true.
have many of those days anymore.
Yeah, I've had students who are in Mexico, still in class virtually.
Okay, good. All right. Lieutenant?
She needs to come off
Unmute
mute.
yourself. You're still on mute.
See, she just had another virtual learning experience right then.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, you are correct. I'd like to say before I start my question, it's absolutely obvious and impressive that all of you are working to ensure the success of the students. And as a member of this community, I hope you know how much we appreciate those efforts. One of the things that happens regularly every school year is standardized testing. Has there been thought given to eliminating that testing based on the distance learning during the pandemic? And if so, will you have to use other measurements? And if I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Sanders, who has a county perspective, to respond first, and then Mr. Dillard and Mr. Holland. I welcome all your responses.
Thank you, Lieutenant Renfro. I think that that's really one of the challenges that's before us, and one of the unknowns we've been talking about is I think there's a desire to give some grace to students that have been impacted by having to go on a new platform and learn a whole new way of learning. But on the other hand, you still need accountability and rigor. And so my guess is that there will be some suspension of the normal testing while they develop, or we develop as a state, methods for really measuring progress in this new environment. But I think there is still a commitment, and Governor Newsom has talked about this, to not relaxing standards and to still having high standards and holding educators and students responsible. It's just, I'm not sure we know exactly what that will look like.
I know currently we are
Thank you.
we are assessing our EL, our English language learners, with what is called the LPAC, which is a standardized test for the English language learners. So that is taking place currently right now. But as far as I guess the bigger one, that on the SBAC, we still don't know on that. At least I don't know about that one, or I haven't had any word on it.
I think we're all kind of in the same boat. Right at this point, we have not received, to my knowledge, we've not received any notification that it's not going to happen. So we are, moving forward with the understanding that there was some relief requested for the SBAC to the federal government that was not granted. So we're currently kind of moving forward, waiting to hear what kind of modifications will be allowed. I've heard that there's some consideration for, the online environment and whether or not screens have to be on. And I mean, there's a whole lot of things to consider with regards to this test that that my understanding is they're trying to work out now. But so far, we haven't received any notification that we're not going to give it. And other tests have moved forward as normal. We're also doing the LPAC at East. I think we're almost done, was the report I received this week at our administrative meeting with my admin team. So we're almost done with the LPAC, but a lot of the tests that we need to give and things that we need to do have gone on. Our special education testing that we've needed to do as needed has continued. LPAC continued. So I don't know with regards yet to the SBAC, but so far my understanding is that it is slated to continue. The levels of modifications to it have not turned out that I'm aware of. Mr. Sanders probably is a little more dialed in about that than I am. But when we talked about it at our administrative meeting this week, we were still moving forward with the thought that we weren't going to get any sort of a relief from administering that test.
What about the you as administrators at those local schools, East High, William Penn, your assessment of the work of the teachers weekly for thoroughness and rigor, the expectations, because are lessons just given to the students, hey, look at this, write down the question and answer, and what's the level of your assessments for rigor in this virtual learning period?
Try to keep it as normal as possible, as if it were in person, but you have to realize too that we are virtual and we have technical issues that crop up. Not only Wi-Fi issues with some students having Wi-Fi, shaky Wi-Fi at home, or but we also have just simple issue where a computer may just go dead in the middle of a classroom. We've had that. So
yeah,
and go ahead.
Wi-Fi outages for entire swaths of the community. We've got we'll get reports once every 2 or 3 weeks of a Spectrum outage affecting a part of the East Bakersfield community that gets kids offline. I will say that question is very difficult to answer because it probably varies widely, even more widely than I'm, able to put my finger on specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of our teachers are doing a pretty good job of dialing in instruction for students. But I wouldn't sit here and try to tell you that it's, consistent across 100% of my classrooms at my school.
Mm-hmm.
What I can tell you that I think is very important is that the strategies that our teachers are using are evolving. And I'll give you a couple of examples of why I say it that way. At East, in the high school district, only one school had what we would call a block schedule. It was Arvin High School. All the other schools had what we would say is a traditional classroom schedule, 55 to 60-minute periods most days, unless we had a modified schedule for teacher meetings or for fog delays, like Mr. Sanders pointed out earlier, where then you condense the day and the periods get shorter. Every period loses 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how much earlier you're getting out. That's the way every school operated except Arvin. This year, every school went to not only virtual, but a block schedule. So instead of having kids for 55 minutes every day, we now have the kids for an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes every other day, which means that you now have to look at how you are pacing the lessons that you're delivering, the skills that you're trying to teach, how you are going to has to change, and it should change. Because if it doesn't, and if you just look at it as this is a continuous hour and a half, where instead of giving 1 day of instruction, I'm going to give a day and a half of instruction, you are going to blitz your kids right out of the room. Can you imagine going through that or those hours every day from 8 to 1? I mean, that's hard. That's hard. That would be hard on teachers as well as the kids, who would be very challenging for. So figuring out what the skills are that need to be taught, dialing in how those skills are taught, was one of the things that we encouraged our learning teams to take on this year. One of the things that had to be done to make sure instruction was effective this year. I cannot sit here and tell you that it happened everywhere, but I think in most cases at my school, it did. And I think it's continuing to be refined. I think you don't know what you don't know until you get into the school year and start seeing how much information a kid can take in a sitting, how much you can deliver effectively, and how to effectively measure that to determine students' outcomes. All of that was a variable this year, not only because of the distance learning setting, but also because everyone moved to a schedule that we've never done before, with the exception of Arvin. And we'll give Arvin a lot of credit because they've coached up some other schools on how to pace things in a distance learning environment. They've held workshops to help teachers get dialed in on that. And I know some of my teachers have attended it, and it has helped us wrap our minds around how to pace appropriately.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no more comments, I'll go to question number 6. This is, what are the plans for at-risk students and students who will fall behind? Are there plans for summer school remediation classes to help them?
I know from the state standpoint, they're definitely, that's the topic of conversation right now, that and how to reopen schools for in-person instruction. But I think from the governor's perspective and the state's perspective, they don't want to see summer school like it always has been. They want to look at potentially beefing up what is traditional summer school to try to make up some of that learning loss that we know has happened. I know that the state has allocated about $4.6 billion in state funding for what they're calling extended learning opportunities. And they're hoping for also some federal funds to go into that pot as well. But these might be strategies like acceleration academies, where they would have extended school days, weekend school, more robust summer school options, tutoring opportunities, maybe some more assessments to determine the actual learning loss. So I think the state's perspective is that summer moving forward looks different. But I think we also have to counter that with, parents are tired. Everybody's been through a year of pandemic, parents and educators. And so, we go into the spring months, and summer is traditionally a little bit of a break where you get to go outside and enjoy each other as a family a little bit. And so, I think we have to balance that. What can we do during the summer to address that learning loss, but also realize that, where families are and parents and educators in terms of meeting those needs.
How do you determine which students get access to those resources?
Well, I think the state's perspective is that, you're looking at serving who are the most vulnerable students that have not done well via distance learning. And, there's a lot of factors that can contribute to that. And then I think, you also try to develop some sort of accelerated learning that is available to all students so that all kids, regardless of where they're at, are able to move forward in their own individual progress.
Okay. Well, Mr. Dillard or Holland, like to add anything?
Yeah, it's an ongoing discussion that we're having in the high school district for sure. Summer school, I will say a couple of things about it. Summer school this summer will probably, as Mr. Sanders was saying, I don't think it's going to look like it has looked in the past, but it's hard. This is one of those questions it's hard to give you a very specific answer on, because a lot of it's going to depend on where we are with regards to our community being able to reopen for some sort of in-person learning versus virtual. And none of us have a crystal ball to really look down and tell you what that's going to look like yet. So it's hard to give you a very specific answer. What I can tell you is it's certainly something that is on our radar and that we're considering with regards to both learning loss and, for us in the high school district, credit recovery. Those are both concerns because we want to make sure students are graduated, ready for that next step in life, like our mission statement says. So it's all part of our ongoing discussions as town leadership groups in the high school district. And also, as a principal, I don't want to wait till the summer. And I can tell you, my colleagues, the principals in the high school district, we don't want to wait till summer either. Learning loss recovery is an ongoing thing. It's part of the pedagogy that's baked into kind of PLCs. Like, what do you do when a kid does not learn what they're supposed to learn? We're supposed to be constantly asking that question. And as we ask that question, the answer shouldn't be, well, we wait till summer school to teach it over again. That can't be the answer.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So the answer is that we have to continue to evolve our strategies as we move along in virtual learning, because that's the format that we have now, to recover any learning loss that we can. And that involves re-engaging students in the school process who have dropped off for one reason or another. Going out, finding those kids, making the house visits, if we have to, making those phone calls if we have to re-engage that student, to remediate the skills and standards that they have missed. And that doesn't wait for summer. That has to be going on all the time in any learning setting. And it's something that our school is working on, and how do we measure it and what it looks like? I mean, this has all been a very important question too, and we're addressing that as well. And I think, I don't want to speak for every school in the high school district, because I only get to lead one, but I believe all of our schools are asking that question and trying to address that now in real time, as opposed to having to wait for summer. We know summer school is going to be different. We know we're going to get a lot of kids that we need to remediate, recover credits, et cetera. But at the same time, we also know that there's no time like the present to teach. That's what we're here for. If you missed something, let's go back and figure out what you missed and teach it now.
Yeah, I think that's well said by Mr. Holland and Mr. Sanders there. How are we going to bridge what they lost, as they return to the in-school setting? And then at the same time, we have to reacclimate them to the in-school or in-person setting, because they're used to sitting at home now and working from, their desk or table or bedroom, getting the snack whenever they wanted to snack, get up, maybe go to the restroom whenever they wanted to go to the restroom from the comforts of our home. Now we're also going to have to not only provide instructional services as far as education is concerned and textbook and content, but also how to maneuver in the school setting, how to, raise your hand, wait to be called on, to sit in your seat or move from this group to the next group, but just how to, behave in a classroom now, behave at the school site.
And depending on when we return, Mr. Dillard's spot on. And depending on when we return, the procedures that are layered on top of just regular school stuff with regards to how to be a student in a classroom at a school while a pandemic's going on, what direction you go in the halls. And my school has interior halls. We would have to think about how many students and when they get released for passing periods, what direction they go. How, there's a whole lot of considerations. Don't use the water fountain, right? Bring your water from home. All sorts of things that we may end up having to be part of what is now baked into being a student. On top of, I know you've been out of school for a year plus. This is how you act in school now. You've been home. This is how you act in school. And oh, by the way, this is how you act in school while we're still trying to get through the pandemic.
Now, are there plans to remove water fountains from the schools?
I know in BCSD, we have started, I'm sorry. They've started removing water fountains from the classroom. Actually, all the water fountains in my classrooms have been removed, and the plan is to replace them with what they call a filling station. And so students are going to have their own water bottles and be able to fill their water bottle.
We haven't gone quite to the level of removing them all, but they're all, at my school at least, they're all sacked up, I guess I would say. We kind of wrapped them up so that they can't be used for the time being. And we also have a version of those filling stations that Mr. Dillard was talking about, where you can fill up a water bottle that you bring from home.
Gentlemen, what about preschools? I'm going into question 7. Have preschools and daycare centers, have they been integrated into the virtual learning program? And Mr. Dillard, you had talked earlier about one of your discoveries from some of your younger students, and I think that this question goes to that. The second question on number 7, are younger students at pre-K through 6th grade at a disadvantage with virtual learning? But start with the first one, Mr. Dillard, Mr. Sanders, daycare centers, and we're not avoiding Mr. Holland since he's in high school. But
may I jump in here for a moment?
Yeah.
I've got a question along that same line.
Yeah.
The African American Network and its Buffalo Soldiers do a weekly food delivery to elders as well as daycare centers. And we have noticed that there are several daycare centers where we don't deliver at a certain time, because at those centers, kids are in a virtual classroom situation. Their parents may still be working, and kids aren't at school, normal school, they're in a daycare, and they are still being taught at these daycares in a virtual environment. So how have you been able to integrate them into this type of a learning platform?
And that might be more for Mr. Sanders, because he deals with a larger span of students than myself and Mr. Holland, because my particular school site, we start at kindergarten through 5th grade. So I don't have transitional kindergarten at my school, nor do I have daycare.
Yeah, so countywide, we operate 13 child development centers or preschools, really geared for low-income families throughout the county. And all of those centers did virtual learning really from the beginning. So in addition to, once we're able to open, having kids there, we also were providing distance learning for preschool kids. And I know those campuses that offer transitional kindergarten, which is really that, between preschool and kindergarten, are also doing distance learning. Boys and Girls Club, as an example, is a nonprofit that really stepped up to the plate, and they really from the beginning were organizing, I guess, what you would call learning hubs, where they would have kids attend at their facilities, many of which are on school campuses, really in kind of pods of groups of 4 or 5 young kids with an instructor doing distance learning and helping those kids navigate that system. So the answer to the question is yes, they've been pretty heavily involved to the degree they can. I also do think that younger kids are more vulnerable with distance learning. The younger you get, the harder it is to be engaged. But that doesn't mean that districts aren't trying and doing everything they can to engage those kids.
Okay, if there are no more comments, I'll move to question number 8. What are schools doing to ensure that the racial academic achievement gap is being addressed, reduced during the pandemic and in the aftermath?
Before we move on, hold on. I will say I have a little anecdote from my little sample group of elementary school students. Um, Having the help from our daughter, from our adult daughter home during the pandemic has been very helpful. I think a lot of times, I don't know, I work from home from time to time, and I don't know that I would have been able to successfully do that had our daughter not been here to help. Out of the twins, everyone thinks you have twins, they're the same. They have two totally different personalities. One of them, you tell him to do something, he sits down and he does it. And it's just, and they're both smart. All of our kids are smart. But the other one, you have to keep him under your thumb to get him to do what he needs to do. And somebody has to do that. And I mean, it doesn't matter that she's there. Every 20 minutes, he's going to want to get up and go get a drink of water, he can only pay attention for so long before he's wandering around. So it's a challenge for families and for teachers to keep students engaged across the age levels. But I think, with regards to my little sample group, I think it's highly dependent. I think Mr. Sanders is spot on that it's a little more challenging with younger kids, I'm sure. I don't have any evidence to suggest that because I teach high school kids, but in my little sample group, I could tell you if our daughter wasn't here, it would be a lot more challenging for us to get anything done, including his twin brother. No one would get anything done if our daughter wasn't here keeping him under her thumb. And so I know this is the way it is in a lot of households, so no one's immune to it. No one's immune to it. And I just think that, like I said, his teacher, their teacher does a fantastic job with those kids, trying to keep them engaged and everything else. So
my heart goes out to those families that, don't have a daughter from Berkeley at home to
Right.
help kids, that maybe you've got a single parent family and mom's working either at home or actually physically going into work. And you've got, a 10 or a 12-year-old home with a younger child expected to learn. Those are the families that I really worry about and that, districts are reaching out to. And, I know that they worry about them too, but I really feel for those kids that don't have that support at home.
Right. And it's something, and I will tell you that I just want to make sure I emphasize this. I think elementary teachers, I think all of our teachers have done a phenomenal job. I will tell you the elementary teachers were trying to come up with activities and breakout rooms and things for those kids to keep them engaged. Fantastic. I mean, fantastic. They're doing everything they can to make sure the learning situation for students is as enriching as it can possibly be in this environment. This goes for all of our teachers. I believe my teachers are the same thing. But I've got, like I said, I got one in my house. I know how it can be. So, it's something that needs to be said. I think our teachers are doing a phenomenal job in our community of trying to keep these kids engaged.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read that question again if we have no more comments. Number 8. What are the schools doing to ensure that the racial academic achievement gap is being addressed, reduced during the pandemic and in the aftermath?
Well, I think that goes back to one of the earlier questions as far as different student groups. Earlier in the school year, before the schools closed again, we were bringing back different student groups. We had our special ed students, we had our foster students, we were bringing back our homeless students, and if we had opportunity to, depending on your needs of your school, other student groups such as African American student groups or EL groups, bring them back for in-person instruction. And I think that will continue on as we, and I like the word that Mr. Holland's been using, evolve, because I think this whole thing that we're dealing with is an evolution. And I hadn't, never thought of it that way until he brought it up, and I think that's spot on. As we continue to evolve in this and bringing back different student groups, in our case, our African American students is a student group that's in high need as far as the instructional services are concerned. And so we do have opportunity to provide extra services such as enrichment learning opportunities or extended learning opportunities after school. So maybe some weekend learning opportunities. And so there is a focus on, I know in Bakersfield City School District, on the African American student group, because it is a student group that's been underachieving as far as academics are concerned.
Are these enrichment classes or opportunities and extended learning opportunities going on presently in the virtual setting?
Yeah, you have some schools that are implementing the Proud Academy. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Proud Academy in Bakersfield City School District. Not all schools have it. I know they're hoping to extend it into other school sites. Yeah. And so I don't know too much how they're doing that, how they're performing at the other schools. I don't have a Proud Academy at my school site. My African American population is really small. But I know some of the schools with the larger African American populations, they have the Proud Academies there.
Okay.
It's I think in the high school district, it's an ongoing an ongoing question, and in my mind, with some pretty strong solution ideas out there that we were fortunate enough to implement at my school. So y'all have been to my school and been part of our Black History program before. The Miss Owens, with the help of a couple of our African American staff members, Miss Bryan, Miss Golston, help out with that. The program that she's involved with at our school for our young ladies will continue. The YWEL program that Dr. Lewis is helping out with as well from the district level. I'm very proud of that program, and the many schools that are involved, including ours, and of our staff members that are involved in mentoring those young ladies. That has continued in the pandemic. I talk to Ms. Owens frequently about it. I know she is continuing to work with our young ladies to make sure that they are staying connected, that they're staying involved in their grades, and that she's communicating with counselors about needs that these young ladies are having so that we can try to meet their needs moving forward. And then also Project Best, which is also continuing in the high school district and making connections with the young men. And then also our programs for our Latino students are continuing and evolving as well. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to our Latino students, men and women, boys and girls, I should say, boys and girls, to move forward as well with their academic process. What we are seeing, at least at my school, is that during the pandemic, we've had some girls that are struggling. We've had our pockets of successes. Ms. Owens has been very transparent with me, communicating those. We've also seen some struggles with some of our girls, and we've had to address some of their struggling academic concerns. As we transition back into school, there's a couple of things that we're doing, at least in my school and several school sites, to make sure that we're dealing with some of the emotional fallout from this, as well as the academic needs, like getting our teachers trained up, more of our teachers trained up on some more in-depth circle strategies so that we can have our circle groups for our students who are struggling emotionally, and also making sure that we have an infrastructure available that measures outcomes, which we're doing with our Plus program, to try to see how our students are advancing and what they're feeling about what's going on. And that's both now and it will continue after the pandemic's over in school.
I'd say from our perspective at the superintendent of schools, one of the positives of this environment with Zoom is professional development. With teachers all over the county via Zoom, we're able to do much more professional development where they can do it from the comfort of their own classroom or home. And so we did our first equity symposium a couple years ago. with the help of an equity steering committee that Mrs. Slade was part of and many others. We've continued that and actually enhanced that. We're in the middle of a series on equity professional development with Monica Washington, who was the Texas State Teacher of the Year in 2014. She was the keynote speaker at our equity symposium. So she's been leading a monthly series for educators on a lot of different aspects of equity in education. You know, we also are fortunate enough to have an African-American as our state superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurman. And so at the state level, there's been a focus on equity that from my perspective is even more than ever. And so districts are having those conversations. And I know for Dr. Barlow personally, that's one of her priorities. We're getting ready to embark on a new strategic plan for the next 3 years. And one of the priorities she's asked us to weave into all of our work is equity. And how do we continue this conversation? So I think from a positive standpoint, that work is not only continued, but has been enhanced.
You know, Mr. Holland mentioned the YEWL program, and I'm glad he brought that up because the African American Network has been involved in that program at North High. We adopted North High, and I'm working with those young ladies out there. In fact, Mr. Sanders has come aboard with us in helping those young ladies and seeing that they get additional instruction and help when they needed it. So there are these programs continuing. We have gone from in the classroom with them to virtual learning, and we're continuing to work along those lines.
I'm really proud of our work with regards to the YWEL program. That is phenomenal work that we're doing. And I will say, you know, like I said earlier, I give Dr. Lewis a ton of credit. And at my school, I give Keisha, Mrs. Owens, Mrs. Golston, and Ms. Bryant a lot of credit with keeping our girls engaged and making sure that it's an ongoing care that we have to do when you run into an issue like this. You know, this is, like I said earlier, it's almost like a partnership. You know, this is bonding us all together. We're all struggling with the pandemic. It equalizes us all. We're all at risk of this. And so making sure that we reach out to those girls and make sure they understand we care about them now too, even though we can't see them every day, is just huge. And so I love that program. We were an early adopter at East, I'll say that. So I'm very proud of the work we've done.
Holland, could you tell us, both for me and for our larger audience, what do those YWEL letters stand for?
Young Women Empowered for Leadership.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
I was going to move on to question number 9, and it kind of ties into what we talked about in 6, but this is coming from a parent. I'm a single parent with 3 school-age children, and I have to work every day. I can't afford childcare. I see that my children are falling behind at this time of distance learning. Are there any programs offered by the schools to help me and my children?
I think I'll go first on this one. So yes, there are programs to help. So our district offers district level tutoring Monday through Friday, 1:30 to 3 in all subjects. You can find that link to go there to get that help on your student's Canvas page. There's a link that says help in the lower left-hand side of their home screen on Canvas. You go there and click on that. Your student can receive additional support from 1:30 to 3 from the district level. Also, our district in our schedule baked in some time from 1:30 to 3 for additional help, subject by subject, teacher by teacher, built into our schedule, which is common throughout the district. Not every teacher is available every day during that time because teachers have other obligations like learning team meetings, IEPs that they have to attend that can be attended during those times as well. But those hours are there so that additional support can be given to students as they need. And then a third thing is that every school, I'm pretty sure every school, I know our school does, and most of the schools that I'm aware of offer additional tutoring as well, sometime after school, that is separate from what the district offers. So you can get multiple layers of support. You can get district level support from 1:30 to 3, Monday through Friday. I explained how to find that. You can get teacher specific support. You would have to email the teacher and work that out with the teacher to find out when they are available to do that and offer that support. And then you can also get school site level support, which the hours for that vary. And the best way to go about doing that is calling or emailing the counselor for your student, who should be able to point you in the right direction for that. And I will tell you also, I've mentioned how hard our teachers are working in the high school district to make sure the learning experience is great. Our counselors are also working, very hard. It's layered on top of just the academic counseling is also the social emotional needs of the students right now, that our counselors are typically the clearinghouse for those students who go into crisis or students who have social emotional needs. Our counselors are working extremely hard and doing a fantastic job. If you reach out and email the counselor, they will point you in the right direction for after school tutoring at your school. Most schools offer that at some point. We offer our after school tutoring a little bit later in the evening at East, so that our families or students who have jobs or whatever, they have a separate set of hours that are outside of that regular business hour time frame where they can go in and receive some additional tutoring as well. I think that is a very comprehensive answer. So if you are a parent falling into that category, please, listen to what I'm telling you. There is support for your student. Take advantage of it. We are not in the business of making a situation hard and seeing students not succeed. That is clearly not the message that you're getting from any of us today. We want your students to succeed. The infrastructure for success is built into what we're trying to do. Please take advantage of the things I'm telling you.
Great.
All you need to do is just call the school.
See, that's even easier, Anthony.
And then I'll just add that also look in the community outside of, there are resources even outside of school, Boys and Girls Club, other nonprofits that are trying to do their part and help up. And then I did want to address the lack of childcare. I encourage families that can't afford childcare to contact Community Connection for childcare. There are some state funds and federal funds available for emergency childcare to help families that can't afford it. And so again, that's Community Connection for Childcare, which is really our local childcare resource and referral agency to help families.
Great.
I think that this question is representative of many parents, single parents in our community, and especially in the inner city. And when we put this format together, I felt it a strong need to get a question, at least one question from a parent. And this came from a parent that is very concerned about her children. So thank you very much for your answers there.
Absolutely. And I'm going to change this last question up a little bit, because I know you don't have a crystal ball. So the way I'm going to position it is, if you could have a major impact on what the next school year looks like, what would that look like? And how does that represent the teachers and the parents and students in its best factor?
Well, I would have all the students back. I get, because as it stands right now, according to CDC, and because of the size of our classrooms, we're only allowed to have like maybe 14 students in the classroom. So you won't have all of your students receiving in-person instruction at any one time. So, and it's hard to, I know you tried to change that question up a little bit, because we don't have a crystal ball, and that is still hard to answer, because I guess because of what we've had to deal with so far, everything's been constantly changing, and so our mindset right now is, okay, I could say this now, but it could change in a couple of days. So, but if I just had the perfect scenario, we'll just return all back to in-person instruction, all the students, all the staff with, without any worries, not worrying about social distancing, not worry about, students playing with one another. So that, I would just wish we could just go back to the way it was last year at this time.
I would agree. And I would just add, I think a vaccine for educators and our frontline staff, and hopefully that's coming soon to allow people to return. And then I think using what we've learned with distance learning and technology to enhance that in-person instruction so that we can help kids that maybe don't do as well in in-person instruction. But I agree with Mr. Dillard. We got to get those kids back in school. And I asked an 8th grader, I was volunteering yesterday morning somewhere, and I asked him, what he misses about school. And he said, my friends, girls, and academics. And he said, and girls come first. So, and he was kind of joking around with me, but at the same time, it's true. These kids miss their friends. They miss that social interaction. They miss that accountability that comes from all those skills you learn interacting with your peers. So in a perfect world, we're back and continuing that learning.
And I think we have to realize too, with this, especially I see it for the younger kids, for our kindergarten students, they have never maybe seen some of their peers in real life.
That's true.
Never. They haven't seen their teacher in real life. And I'll just tell you just the cutest story. Back in the fall, a couple of months, the school had, we've been in school a couple of months. And one of the kindergarten students, he was walking up to the school with his grandmother, I think, to pick up a packet. And his teacher, who was teaching, who teaches from the school site, she happened to be leaving the building at the same time as they were coming to the building. And you should have seen the look on his face. You would have thought his teacher was a rock star. He said, "Oh, that's Mrs. Dunlap. Oh, that is Mrs. Dunlap. Grandma, that's Mrs. Dunlap." Oh, you would, because for him, if you see somebody on a screen, that person is a movie star or some kind of actor or athlete or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he had never seen his teacher in person until that very moment, because the only time he had seen his teacher, it was on the screen. And that was just the cutest thing I had ever seen. So a lot of the students have never seen their teachers in real life. They've only seen them on the screen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say I was a debate coach and a debater in high school and college and stuff. And so one of the arguments that we used to say, one of the concepts was making sure things are conditional. So if the conditions change in the debate, the argument can go away because it's no longer relevant or germane. And I think everything that we've talked about that's forward facing and looking in the future is conditional today. It's all dependent upon the direction the virus goes. Right now, I'm very trusting that our superintendency and our boards will make the appropriate decisions for us moving forward to make sure we can get to where we need to be. And I will tell you this, one of my favorite sayings is, a dream without a plan is a wish. And I will tell you, we have to do our part. The faster we as a community wrap our minds around doing the things we need to do, the better and quicker we can get kids back into school. And I can't say it any more bluntly than that, how I fall down on that. Mr. Sanders talked about getting people vaccinated. It's huge. We got to do that. We got to do our part, make sure moving forward, if I had my wish, we'd be back in school in person. Like, to answer your question specifically, next year we'd be back in school in person, normal. Friday night, I'll be standing in the end zone where I'm standing, watching us win. That's what I want. If I had my way, that's the way it would be. If I had my
Unless he played the Drillers.
Come on now.
I'm just talking.
Come on now. I'm not even going to go into that one right now. I'll let that one later for a minute. But I will say, if we look at this the way I wish we did, and getting back to school was the priority. Now, I understand all the other things out there. I've already talked about how important businesses are. I talked about the pizza place that I love. But if the priority, opening restaurants, very important. I want to go eat out. Bars, very important. Going to gym, very important. All of that, all very important stuff. But I'm a principal at a high school. The most important thing to me is educating the next generation. Right? So to me, I hope we can wrap our minds around slowing this down so that we can get kids into school. We've talked about being able to reopen. I want to be able to reopen safely. We got to slow the virus down. Right now, the virus is in control. And the sooner we get control back from it and we're able to get back into school, the better off we'll all be. If I had my wish, to answer the question, my wish is that we get back in school, regular school, no social distancing, having rallies and games and stuff. We now back to this Driller thing, won a state championship in basketball that we did not get to celebrate. The school closed down as soon as we won it. In fact, we won the Southern Section Championship. We were about to go up to Sacramento and finish the thing off and couldn't go play. Didn't get to celebrate that because school closed. And so there are things that I want to happen, regular school, but in order to do that, we have to make sure we're prioritizing getting kids back into school. And the way we do that is everybody stepping up and doing their part, wearing a mask, being distant, getting vaccinated when it's appropriate. Let's get kids back into school.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of the Buffalo Soldiers, I want to thank you, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Dillard, and Mr. Holland for joining us in this great conversation that I know a lot of parents are interested. I have 6 grandsons, all ranging from 2 to 17. So what you're experiencing, Mr. Holland, my kids experience as well. And so I understand from a grandparent standpoint the challenges that we have. So the more that we can have these type of discussions and allow the folks out there to know what resources are available, because unfortunately there are people that don't know that they can call the school and get help. So their kids are floundering. So I hope all of us on the call, we start to spread the word so that if we know a single parent is out there struggling, hey, have you called your school? Have you talked to the principal? Have you talked to the counselor? So again, thank you guys for coming on. And this was invaluable.